Good afternoon. I'm Chris Steinmetz from the Autism Society of Iowa, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our Lunch and Learn on Siblings. Our presenters today are Ann Spaine and Mary Chadwick. Ann Spaine is a licensed mental health therapist and is currently practicing at ChildServe in Johnston as a therapist and team lead. She has been in this current role for 3 years and practicing as a therapist for over 13. She is also a mother, wife, and sister, all roles that have informed and inspired her in her work as a SIBSHOPS facilitator since 2011. Ann graduated from the University of Iowa with an undergraduate degree in psychology, preceded by a master's in mental health counseling from Drake. Occupational roles have ranged from SCL provider, case manager, service supervisor, and be his provider prior to studying to be a therapist. Mary Chadwick is a wife and mother of 2 children. Since 2015, she has served on various nonprofit boards and advisory panels advocating for those with disabilities and their siblings. She currently serves as a board member on the Autism Society of Iowa. Thanks to both of you for presenting today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to share my screen. I have a very basic PowerPoint I just got ready for us as kind of a way just to make sure I stay on topic. I could talk for a long time about SIBSHOPS and sibling support, so this will help me stay focused. Let me share my screen. I am so excited to be here today, and there might be some people that know me from our time, or our work has overlapped in some ways. Can you guys see my PowerPoint from there?
Yes, we can, Ann.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so as I'm talking, I am absolutely okay to be interrupted if you have a certain question, or I kind of like to present in a way that feels more of a discussion than something more formal, but I also have some information to share. So I'm okay if people don't feel comfortable talking, but I'm okay if you unmute yourself and talk and share ideas or thoughts or questions. And Mary, as I'm going, if you have anything you want to add from a parent perspective, I love that too. So I'll start and talk with you a little bit about sibling support was the topic that Chris had asked that Mary and I come and talk about today. And I was asked to come and speak about it because I am one of the facilitators for a sibling support group at ChildServe. I've been fortunate to kind of come on board at ChildServe when they had already had this kind of started. And so it was really cool to be able to jump on board. I had had some experience doing it at a previous agency that I was with as well. And so it just really become something I've loved doing. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. And our agenda today, let's see if my slide will go to the next one. I'll kind of talk to you about what SIBSHOPs are and how they support siblings. We'll talk a little bit about sibling relationships and what's unique to the sibling experience. We'll talk a little bit about communication, and then I'll share a little bit about my adult sibling perspective. And then I'm going to invite Mary to share a little bit about her parent perspective when it comes to siblings and the sibling support group and anything that she wants to share. And then Mary will also be sharing a little bit about her son's experience as a sib. And then I'll have a little bit of time at the end for any questions or thoughts. Or I love to learn from you guys and you and your families, what you found helpful or not helpful when it comes to sibling support. The thing that's kind of exciting to me about working with siblings is that there's been more and more research about sibling relationships. I don't know if any of you are NPR fans, but NPR actually has a whole series they're doing about siblings and the science behind sibling relationships and how important they are. So that's really inspired me even more in my work with siblings. So the power of connection, one way that we have found to support siblings. So when we say siblings, we're defining those as individuals that have a brother or sister with special healthcare needs. One way we found to support those special siblings is through connecting them with other siblings. And so that's kind of at the heart of SIBSHOP. SIBSHOPs are opportunities for brothers and sisters of children with special health, mental health, and developmental needs to obtain peer support and education within a recreational context. It was started by the 2 people, Meyer and Videsi. Dawn Meyer is the first the first creator of it, and he's actually a sibling himself. And so he designed this curriculum for SibShop. So I want to make sure I give them due credit. And so some things that a SibShop is, it's a celebration of Sibs, a chance to know that you're not alone. It's a time to support each other. And it's designed around activities, games, crafts, discussions, information, and fun. The curriculum is particularly designed for school-age children. We found that it works best with around the age of 6 to 7 to about 12. One thing we want to make sure that we share is that SibShops are not a therapy group, so that a mental health diagnosis is not required to participate in SibShop, and it's designed more as a support group rather than a therapy group. And basically what that means, one, is that a mental health diagnosis is not needed to participate, and two, they're not therapy goals that are individualized to the participants. Another piece about that we want to make clear about, even though I am a mental health therapist, a mental health therapist is not required to run the group. There is a training required to become a facilitator. So it's a training that you do through the SibShop curriculum, but having a license is not a requirement as a facilitator. Those are some differences of it being a support group as opposed to a therapy group. As we're thinking about SibShops, I thought it would be helpful to have a little bit of an example of how a SibShop might run. And so it's typically a time that's scheduled, let's see, 10 to 1. So 3 hours is what we usually do. I think there's a little bit of leeway there. And as you can see from one of our sample schedules, the kids arrive. Usually we do some type of trickle-in activity, so something they can do while the other participants are getting there. We usually have our participants do a journal. So they have some journal prompts that will bring up topics common to siblings, and they get to decorate those. Everybody gets their own journal. They grab those, make a name tag as they're coming in. We like to then go around and share a little bit about themselves and what SibShop is. Then, like, some example activities that we do is the kids love a ball toss, and it's where you actually say your name and you throw it to the next person, and then you keep this pattern going. You're always throwing it to the same person. Then we add balls or animals in, so they're throwing it to that person, saying their name, getting to know each other, and just kind of breaking the ice a little bit. Then another activity example is a bingo game where we walk around and get to know people and learn different things about them. We usually like to do something kind of wild, like a snowball. This must have been one of our winter programs. We did like a snowball race where we had cotton balls you had to scoop up and do a little relay to see who can gather the most. Another activity, feelings on a rope. So you're identifying how you feel about different topics. How are you similar to your peers? How are you different? Balloon toss would be part of that. Secret Leader is a favorite game in SibShops. It's where we have the kids gather in a circle and one person leaves the room and they can't listen while we decide who the secret leader is. And that leader then will do some type of action that all the other kids have to follow. Then that person enters the room back and has to guess who the secret leader is. For some reason, this is a huge hit and is usually part of each of our SibShops. And then we have other activities that might be like a sibling survival. So there's kind of like it's kind of a way to talk about some of the good parts about being a sib and some of the hard parts and how do we help each other. These kids have some of the best ideas for each other. So it's the cool thing I've loved about being a facilitator is oftentimes, you know, kids might ask a question about, oh, have you ever felt embarrassed about your sib? And we can ask the other siblings to help with that answer. So the facilitators are just kind of there to help get those connections going, but the kids just have so much wisdom that they bring, and I've just been amazed by them. Typically, then we'll do a lunch break and then something active afterwards, like a snowball fight. We like to, obviously, you can tell that a lot of our kids, it seems like the really active things. So we'll do something like to kind of get the action going in the room, snowball fights, making snowballs. We've made different things. We do a lot of crafts in there. And then at the end, we found it really helpful to do something where they have a little bit of free time and just really have some time with the friends that they've made or have some free time with some games that we have out. So that's a little bit what our sib shops look like. I wanted to share with you the goals of a sib shop. The first one is to provide siblings of children with special needs an opportunity to meet other siblings, discuss common joys and common concerns, learn how others handle situations commonly experienced, and also to learn more about the implications of their brother or sister's special needs. Another goal of Sib Shop is to provide parents and other professionals with opportunities to learn about the concerns and opportunities frequently experienced by brothers and sisters. And I thought this was kind of a cool quote. We're not heroes any more than we are victims or sufferers. I'm just a person with a brother whose condition makes an added complication in my life. And that, like everything else, has both its pluses and minuses. So it's just really, as you can tell from that, one of the big goals of Sib Shops is to really normalize. There's joys to it, there's some hard things to it, and we're all just kind of figuring it out together. One thing I wanted to make sure I had time to share with is some of the uniqueness that we see that the research supports about siblings. And I wanted to take a little bit of time and share kind of what the Sib Shop curriculum shares about these, and then also open it up if you guys have any feedback or things that you've seen in your families. Some of the unique concerns that we see is over-identification. And I wanted to read to you what the definition of that is, or kind of an explanation. So over-identification occurs when a sibling wonders whether he or she shares or will share a sibling's problem or fate. Over-identification is more likely to occur when the disability is mild, and especially if it is invisible. So this might be seen in a brother or sister that thinks, like the example that they shared in here, a boy worries that he might catch his sister's cerebral palsy and lose his ability to walk. And sometimes these can be irrational, but it is something that we commonly see among SIBs. And I also want to share, as I was sharing these, this isn't the case for every SIB. These are just some common things that the research has found. That's a little bit about over-identification. Does anybody have any feedback or thoughts about that concern?
It made it possible so that if people want to unmute or they want to start their video, they sure can if they have any questions for you or comments.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, feel free to jump in, and I want to give enough space for you guys to share your feedback, but I also don't want you to feel pressure to either. That's one thing with our siblings I think is so important, and I found so powerful in having the opportunity to lead these, is that we give kids permission to talk about anything that they want to in our sib shots, but they don't have to share. There's some kids that just like to let it sink in and kind of just like to listen, and that's okay too. So I want to give you permission for that today too. Sometimes it's nice to have a lunch where you're just listening, and that's okay. I'll move on to the next one, which talks about embarrassment. I'll share a quote from the book that Don Meyer shares. My friends and I were watching movies one night, and all of a sudden my brother came bolting downstairs with nothing on. I was so embarrassed. My friends were like, "Does he do that often?" Question mark. So this is one example of kids that might feel embarrassment for their sibling or not, and maybe knowing how to explain it to their friends why their brother or sister might act a different way or do something that's embarrassing. Does anybody have any examples or thoughts about embarrassment? I'll share an example from, I can't remember if I shared this or not earlier. I have a brother with special healthcare needs, and still to this day, if we go to movies together, he loves to laugh really loudly, and sometimes I get I still to this day as an adult sibling will get sometimes embarrassed. And so this is a really common one that I remember growing up when my friends would come over, but I also feel as an adult. Definitely common. We'll move on to the next one about guilt. And feel free to, if something comes up for you later as we're talking, feel free to circle back. If anything you want to share. Another common concern among sibs that we see is guilt. I think this one is a little bit self-explanatory, but some things I wanted to share about guilt is that siblings of individuals with special needs are far more likely to experience guilt than siblings of individuals without special needs. Do you guys have any thoughts about why that might be, or things that you've noticed within your families or friends?
I
And
think,
Chad, go ahead,
and
Mary.
this is Mary. In the guilt side of it, I think sometimes what we've seen in our family is the with the older daughter. So I have a 9-year-old son and a 13 and a half year old daughter, and the 13-year-old is the one with the special disabilities. And the guilt that the younger one sometimes feels is that everything is a challenge at times. While some things come easy at times, it's the constant challenge, that little things that come easy to him. And at times he wonders why does she have to struggle? I think that's the common one we see him communicate.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that, Mary.
This isn't exactly guilt, but I have a teenage granddaughter with autism, and then a 14-year-old grandson. And the kiddo with autism, she will get on a roll and she'll talk, 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 talk. And adults, her grandma and her mom will listen, and the other adults listen and really stay engaged however long she wants to. And the 14-year-old will too. But I know I've seen, just a little sign every once in a while that I think he wishes she would just enough already, just kind of gets tired, but he hangs right in there with her. And I think he probably feels kind of guilty, but he does hang in there. But that's hard, that'd be hard for a sibling to, because this girl can go on and on and on. So kind of guilt, maybe a little resentment, but doesn't show it. Man, he hides it, and it's, very sweet.
Oh, sounds like a lot of patience and that he's developed.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And we'll talk a little bit more too about like the resentment piece that can be common as well. And something that I wanted to share about a little bit more about the guilt piece. Siblings who feel somehow responsible for their brother's or sister's disability or illness may experience irrational but nonetheless real guilt. They may feel that they are somehow being punished for something they said or did or thought near the time of the diagnosis. There was a report of an interview of 33 siblings of pediatric cancer patients. Of the 33 siblings, 9 reported that when the individual patients were diagnosed, they considered the possibility that the illness would not have occurred if they had treated their brother or sister differently. I find that so intriguing that maybe depending on the developmental level of the sibling or the developmental like chronological age of the sibling, there could be some self-blame there. with that guilt. Somehow I did something to create this, or somehow I did this or that, or maybe if I hadn't done this, this wouldn't have happened. And so it's very common. And we'll talk a little bit more coming up here about the need for communication and some of the informational needs that siblings have. It's very developmentally typical to have, especially when we're young, to think the world revolves around us. So we think we have a little bit more control over things than we really do at a young age. And that's part of our survival, right? But we have to sometimes check in with sibs about that. So thank you guys. I hope you keep the stories coming. We'll talk a little bit next about isolation, loneliness, and loss. And so kind of talking a little bit about this, I think this kind of says a lot in one, right? Isolation, loneliness, and loss. We know that sibling relationships can be some of the longest in our lives. So yes, there's some risk to isolation and loneliness and loss, but there's also some benefit to siblings. They can actually help with this as well, to help us feel less lonely and isolated if those relationships are nurtured and are positive. Any thoughts around these, the loneliness and loss that came up for you?
Well, what I was saying about my grandson being so good about listening to his sister, I almost think that it improves their relationship, because I think he realizes, that she needs him. And so I think he's more giving. I know when I was a teenager, I fought tooth and nail with my teenage sib, but these two are very close. And I think that her autism, I think, has brought them closer.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Kind of going off what you were saying too, they've done some more studies about sibling relationships, and they did a study with the Hispanic families. Not sure why they targeted that, why that was their sample population, but I think they saw strength in that culture and the way that they nurtured their siblings and their family relationships. And they actually found that a lot of the siblings took a lot of joy in caring for their siblings. And they actually had reward centers in the brain that, when they did brain scans, that became ignited when they were caring for or helping a sibling. And so I think kind of what you were saying, and I appreciate you so much you sharing, is that there are some benefits to this. And through some of our modeling as the caregivers and parents and adults in these children's life, we can help them see that caring for each other and being somebody that supports a sibling can actually bring joy. Doesn't always, it might have some stresses too, but it does have that joy potential.
I totally agree.
So it's some really exciting things that we're learning. I'm excited about that. Anybody else want to share anything about that topic? Okay, we'll go on to the next one. We're talking a little bit about resentment. I find this one, it's so interesting. Something I've learned doing sib shops over the last few years is, we think about, oh, this son or daughter, we go to all these appointments and they have special helpers come over. Sometimes we'll see siblings get a little bit jealous of that. Oh, they get that special appointment, or they have a respite provider, or they have a BHIS provider coming in, or they get to go do special things out in the community together. And sometimes we see kids get a little bit jealous. I think jealousy and resentment can sometimes go together. Or maybe they'll get a little bit jealous of the extra attention from the parents. I remember growing up, I have 5 siblings, and so sometimes my brother with special needs would get an extra like reward when he would do well on a test or get his homework done. And there was some resentment among the siblings of, well, I passed the test and I didn't get anything. So this was like somewhat of a common one in my family growing up. Um, and what helped with it was just the talking about it. My brother, we would talk about he has a little bit different abilities and strengths and areas of need than someone else in my family did. And so this was a common trend in my family. Does anybody else have experience with resentment or jealousy that they've noticed?
This is Mary here. We have experienced that about the appointments you've talked about, so we call them fun buddies, which are the respite providers or the social community living helpers. So actually, I could see the point, especially being the younger, right? Why is the older sibling getting to have all this and everything? So we actually hired him a fun buddy that was a high schooler. And so once a week in the summer, he got to do it and he loved it, and then he realized it. But the big thing that I think that was like a one-off thing that we did, but the biggest thing we've tried to do is what he has realized is because he is the younger, there are certain programs that offer siblings to be able to participate because you are a sibling of somebody. So we try to find those activities that the two of them can do it. And like when he was 4, he was on a stage, a big stage in front of a big crowd, and that was something he would have never been able to do before. And so trying to find those things that maybe is a strength of the other one, that they can work together, has made a big difference for us.
Oh, I love that, Mary. I love that you were able to notice that and be like, okay, what can we do? How can we work through this a little bit and take some steps? See, there's a couple of things in the chat. Wanted to make sure I read real quick here. Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Just that you're noticing a little bit of the jealousy between the two, even at a young age, how attuned they are. Absolutely. I think kids are so in tune, and I mean, sounds like you were in tune to them to notice that as a parent.
This is Catherine. My kids are almost 4 and almost 7, and the 4-year-old is very jealous that the 7-year-old gets to go to therapy and has sensory aids and things like that. So we've, explained the difference between tools and toys, but if the younger one ever wants a weighted blanket or anything like that, we always have been giving it to her. It'll probably be different when she gets to school, but for now, we're trying to not treat them that differently, I guess. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but that has helped us a little bit on this.
Mhm. Appreciate you sharing that. I think you're being in tune to them. And I think it's so hard as parents, like we want a right or wrong we want it to feel like, oh, is this a right or wrong? And I don't know if there always is a right or wrong. I think it's just being in tune to them. It sounds like you are in tune to kind of what they're saying, and normalizing jealousy, I think, is one of the best things you can do is like, oh gosh, I noticed that you're feeling jealous about that. And let's talk through what can we do. And I think every family that looks a little bit different for how it seems to be work out well. And it sounds like for you guys, it works out just to be like, okay, we're going to do it both the same way for this piece. And the weighted blankets, you guys can both get one. And um, it's not easy to navigate sometimes, is it? Like, um, yeah, I think jealousy is often a feeling, not to get too much on my therapist hat over here, but like, it's often a feeling that can be um, ashamed in some ways in our culture. And I think it's actually a very healthy, normal feeling and usually has a purpose. Maybe we want to feel closer to somebody. I still remember this little boy who came in to our sib shop. His brother was diagnosed with autism, and he couldn't figure out how to play with his brother, and he just craved it so much. And um he would often just engage in some of the things that his brother was doing so that he could get his attention. And so I think a lot of times we crave a closeness with our siblings, and we don't always know the tools of how to do it. And so maybe having a similar toy or similar, like you said, weighted blanket. I like how you said you separate tools and toys. That's kind of a cool distinction. And so just kind of opening up that conversation seemed really powerful. Help them feel maybe a little bit more connected in that way. We'll talk a little bit now about increased responsibility. And so I think this one is kind of self-explanatory, but also some nuances to it. I'll share a little bit. I'll share a little bit with the book to give some examples of this. One sibling shared, one of the toughest things about being a sib are the sacrifices you have to make. It means being flexible 24/7 and always being aware that there are often changes that need to be made. This is Allie, who is 15. Another sibling shared, as soon as I could see over the counter in the kitchen, I was making my own school lunch right beside my mother, who was making the exact same lunch for my brother. And then Daniel went on to say, the responsibility definitely stinks. I get few privileges for all the work I do for my family and my little brother. These are some common experiences that sibs have shared. Does anybody have any examples of that they want to share?
I think sometimes with it, the increased responsibilities can be viewed as a negative thing, because you can't do it all, right? Um, and so you lean on those that may be able to, but at the same time, I think it's a blessing for the sibling in some avenues because it's creating that independence, pushing them to be independent. And in some situations, it becomes then the person that has the challenge wants to be that independent also. So, um, although it may be a downside at sometimes, I think depending on how it's presented and if you turn it into a game or something, eventually it can be a motivator for moving forward for the whole family.
That's really cool, Mary. It sounds like you have some creativity of turning it into something fun, that responsibility.
We try our best. Each day is different.
I love that. Well, thank you guys. Well, the last one I have on here, and I'm sure this is not all encompassing. These are just kind of the ones that the Sib Shop curriculum brought attention to. But the last one on here is the pressure to achieve. One sibling shared, ever since I was a child, I was put into that role. Rescuer, perfect child, the one who would make everything right. And all the time while the craziness was going on in my family, I was trying to maintain my grade point average and go to college and become a doctor. This was David. Shared this. One child shared, I couldn't express anger. There was a lot of denial and I had to remain well behaved all the time. Anybody want to share anything about this that they noticed?
I think this one goes along. It's very common and it's very understandable because with increased responsibilities for the sibling that naturally come, the internal dialogue that they have amongst themselves with the pressure to achieve is natural. So I think if parents or the care team can help navigate with them ways not to feel that pressure, or it's about one of our common things we do is we want him to be the best version of him, just like we want his sister to be the best version of her. And whatever that looks like is the best thing. Let's focus on the journey and it'll get us the end result to be your best version. And I think if we focus on that instead of a attainable, tangible sometimes, that helps reduce the pressure. Because like if you think you have to get like be the star, let's say for sports in general, if that's one pressure, like the top, there's certain things society says that they view maybe that's what their path should be because that's what they should be. And they do that. The journey is everything, I think, is the way to that's my personal opinion, is focusing on the journey. And our common language we use is if you fail or fail at something, it's the first attempt in learning. And experiences help practice to make things improve the journey.
I love that. Seems very like growth mindset, Mary. Like, that's awesome.
And
Hello.
obviously not all of these would work for every child because every child is different, but that's just the tidbits that have worked for us.
Absolutely. Was somebody else going to share? I thought I heard somebody.
Hi, this is Myra. I
Yeah.
guess what I wanted to say is that, so I'm on I might be like one of the older ones on here. I have 3 adult children, young adults. And so I waited until the end because I've seen all of these, and they change at the different stages that they go through in life. And one of the things that we had against us is that we didn't have the diagnosis, and they came later. And so, but going back, I can see like each one of those, and I just think that it's so great that they have something like this now, to help with the siblings. All 3 of my boys, 2 of them have autism, and I have twins, and one of the twins, when he was 12, it was discovered he had a nonverbal learning disorder, which actually mirrors Asperger's. And he was the one that I think we spent most of the time on, because he was very hyper and so forth. And then as it turned out, then once we got that diagnosis and we were able to go about things in a different way, he went through a lot of these things more because we didn't have the diagnosis on the brothers, and he just wanted a way to, and so he did have that the extra responsibilities. It upset him because he wanted that freedom to be with his friends and do whatever. He didn't want to have to drive a brother who couldn't drive. The resentment, I mean, that was definitely, I heard from all, it's not fair. You love so-and-so more than the other. And that wasn't just with the siblings either. I might have my nieces over and they all had such a need for attention that it was just difficult to spread it around with everybody. But I guess the point that I wanted to make is that there's different stages and they change, and especially right after puberty, things got really obvious at that point. Like you could really see these different things going on between them. But I'm loving hearing like Mary talking about these different things. It's like we really tried to do that, but I think those things, it would help a lot more if we knew what the underlying reason was why we weren't getting those through. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, your story. And I think you make a wonderful point about how these relationships are growing and evolving and changing with their changing and changing roles with each other. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think it just speaks to the power of these relationships and the lifelong journey of them, that they might be growing and evolving. And I hope they were learning more about how we can support each other. And it's not easy. There's no one quick solution. And growing up, I didn't have a sibling support group, and I wish I did. I feel like now my younger self is getting that from, being a facilitator and hanging out with all these fun kids. And I wish I had that when I was younger, so we would have talked about it a little bit more. So yeah, hopefully we're getting better the more we learn. And even NPR, I don't mean to geek out about NPR, even though I could for hours. Even they're saying that there's been very little research about sibling relationships in the research. So we haven't known. And now that we're knowing, now we can take some steps to do better by our sibs and support that. It's never too late, right? There's always ways to nurture that within our kids or in ourselves and our siblings. I'm sure we all have our own stories of our siblings growing up, special needs or not, right? Like sometimes I think my relationships with my non-special need, identified special needs siblings, I think we all have some things we struggle with for sure, are more complicated than the one with my brother with special needs, so it's interesting to think about that. So thank you guys for being so open and sharing today. I'll kind of go through real quickly the list. I want to give Mary a little time to take the stage. I get tired of hearing myself sometimes. I'll just share a little bit about informational needs. I think these are some really cool things, just kind of putting it out there. What are our siblings needing? They're needing some specific open communication about the special need of their sibling. They're needing to be able to ask questions when they have them. And one way to do that, I'm all about asking questions. So letting kids see us ask questions of others, or saying, I don't know is okay. So opening up to questions, providing with written materials. There's a lot of kind of cool things out there. I wonder if you guys probably even have some resources of your own. Like I can show you a couple I have really quick. Maybe while Mary's talking, I'll grab one of my books behind me that I love to share with sibs. It's like a sibling slam book. So it like has like all these kids' journal entries, and they'll just talk about all the goods and the bads and all the things in between. And then I think it's okay giving ourselves permission as caregivers to involve siblings in service provider visits. So when you're going to doctor's appointments or OT or speech or team meetings with case managers or IEPs, it's okay to involve siblings in that. I think maybe I know from my parents growing up, they didn't want to burden me with that growing up, going to some of my brother's meetings. But honestly, now as an adult, and someday I'll probably be one of the guardians. I'll probably be co-guardian for my brother someday. I wish I would have been more involved in those meetings so that I would have known some of the things, because now I'm playing a lot of catch up. And so giving yourself permission to involve siblings in that. It's also important to determine siblings' knowledge of the condition. What do they know about autism? What do they know about their siblings' diagnosis or their medical conditions, and what caused that? Like we talked about earlier, and I'll just reiterate this really quick, probably like you guys already know, it's important for kids to know that they didn't have any influence over this diagnosis. And then it's also okay to talk about future and talk about fears and talk about what it might look like someday. Maybe someday you might be your brother's guardian. It's okay to talk about that, what it might look like, or how would you feel about being your brother's guardian, or how would you not? How would you feel about helping him with finances? It's okay to talk about that. That can feel sometimes like a lot to some. I think talking to other adult sibs, that can feel like a lot sometimes if it's not talked about, because then it becomes mysterious and maybe even a bigger deal than it needs to be. That's kind of all that I have as far as that. Like we've talked about all these things I've kind of talked about. Lifelong relationship can have positive effects, can also have negative effects. And then NPR has some more information. And then I've already told you a little bit about my sib and being an adult sib. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, if it's okay, Mary, kind of turn it over to you and allow you have some time to talk about your experience. I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay, Mary.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
I don't know that I have a whole bunch, but I can share a little bit about us. I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. Our 13-year-old daughter, actually, our journey in the special needs began as a baby. She had a brain injury at birth, And then shortly before her fifth birthday, she was diagnosed with autism. So that's kind of been our journey. Camden came along around, he's 4 years younger. And so, the big spread, it's the same as me and my brother. We were 4 years apart. So I don't know anything different. But for him, the big thing I know with her being diagnosed at 5, I didn't really realize at the time, but he doesn't know any differently until he goes to some of his friends' houses. Like, he's grown up with a sensory diet. He's grown up with open communication about the feelings. And, it's okay to have a challenge. There's nothing negative about that. And I think that's the biggest thing we started. I don't look and focus on the weakness with her. And that's what me and my husband do. We focus on the strengths and build in those strengths stronger, because everybody has weaknesses, but it's those strengths that are going to help work through. Anyway, so that kind of took that there. She was diagnosed right before 5. She did preschool through 2nd grade in the public school. And we did decide to homeschool after that. Pros and cons both ways. For us, it seems to be a really good fit for her. In our experience, about 11:30, 12 o'clock, her body just said, even at a young age, I'm done. And because her body was done, her anxiety drove through the roof. And the final straw was in 2nd grade for us to homeschool was she had 250 worries when she was in 2nd grade. And that was spring break, and 200 of them were related to school. So that's a little bit about that. As to the siblings and stuff, we started Camden really early. He did play therapy even, because as a younger brother and everything, he did have some incidences with autism that happened that he needed to work through, and we didn't know what to do. So I'm a very strong advocate for whether it be play therapy, family therapy, whatever, that families look into it, because it can make it be stronger and turn it into a positive. So he started that at 3.5, 4, just to work through things. In addition, he started a lot of different programs when we were in Eastern Iowa. There were some things that we were able to partake in that he could be part of. And the biggest thing, I think, he was given a benefit to give at the age of 5, a sibling sister presentation at the nature school he went to. So my daughter talked about autism, and he talked about what it was like to be a sibling at that young age. So shortly from there, he started sib shops because he was old enough in Eastern Iowa. And when we got transferred to the Des Moines area, that was his one requirement. He's like, Mom, I'm not going to know anybody. And he's like, I need to know somebody. And the first weekend he came here to Child Serves, it was a couple years ago now, he came and he knew nobody. And they were talking about friends and stuff. And I don't remember if it was you, Ann, or one of your other counselors. And they said, he said, I have no friends here. And there was another sibling of another boy there that said, well, I'm your friend, so you have your first friend now. And, as much as it can be a challenge for these siblings and what they deal with, their empathy, their compassion, their insight to see through things that parents and adults do not see all the time, they have a very given gift. And I think that, like, alerting them to that gift that, yes, I know it's hard here. I know there's times you can't have this friend over because it's a bad week. But think about how much you cherish those times you get those moments to have the friends over, because it's not just a given. I can do it every day after school. And that's kind of how we've kind of taken it is, yep, there are some really hard times, and the hard is hard. We acknowledge it, we embrace it. Some advice from actually one of the speech pathologists that my daughter had. She actually was a sibling to a brother with autism, and her whole family, she said, I don't know anybody in my friend circle that did not have somebody with autism in their life. That's just how their life grew and their friends grew, and the families happen to have kids the same age. So if that works out for you, great. I'm not saying seclude that way, but she said her strongest thing was her closest friends were the ones that lived the home life that she lived. And she's now on to be a speech pathologist. So I think that's some great advice from her. And I took it, and I actually had my son meet with her and talk. I'm all about anybody that's lived something, live experience, let them have some one-on-one, share their insights as an older person, as a mentor. And honestly, at the stage we're at right now, I'm trying to find a mentor for my son. He's a mentor for a lot of other kiddos that we experience and we meet. Um, and so now it's part of, like I mentioned earlier, we hired a high school boy. Well, that was one way he could have a mentor in a different light. And he loved it. And, that's just kind of my 2 cents. Listen to the siblings, take it. It's not always easy to hear what they have to say, but they have some interesting insight, and they'll surprise you. I think that's really pretty much it. If anybody has, I guess, oh, this is one thing I do want to share. And Anne, maybe you know about some of these. One thing we've looked at is, I know here locally, you guys have the meetings quarterly and stuff, but I've learned that the Sib Shop in Wisconsin has some camps for siblings. And it's like a 3-4 day. Now they're all over. We were going to do it this year, but my son decided he wasn't quite ready to go yet. But I think in a few years he's going to try as a teen, and that's going to be our next channel of him to reach out and see, what it's like.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that, Mary. That's so fun. So is it like
Yeah,
a week-long camp they can go to,
it
or?
is. Yep, it's some of them are 3 days, some of them are a week. It just kind of depends on the ages. And then the other big thing we've done is last year we did a family camp. And it's geared towards special needs. So actually, and not to put a plug, but there is one, I don't know if it's already happened, but Camp High Hopes in Sioux City had a autism day. But I know that, like, Camp Courageous has done some. Um, there's a place up in Minnesota that we actually went to last year and stayed from a Friday to Sunday, and it was called Ironwood Ranch Christian Ranch Resort, I believe is what it's called. It's just south of Rochester. So if you have that opportunity, it's a place to attend the family camp where everybody there is going through something. It might not be the same diagnosis, but you know what? They have the hardship, and it's a place to connect. And whatever happens, happens. Let your kids be kids, and there's no I'm sorry. Is there nothing? There is nothing like that.
Love that. I love that statement. There's no I'm sorry's or like apologizing for who you are.
Mary, Camp High Hopes just had theirs on Saturday, and 30
Oh,
some people showed up just for
okay.
Saturday. Some did weekend camp, and so they're going to continue that and also have a week camp, autism specific this summer, if anyone's interested.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Here's that book I told you guys about, Views from Our Shoes, Growing Up with a Brother or Sister with Special Needs. It's got by the same guy that created the Sib Shops, Don Meyer. If that's interesting to you guys, it's a lot of just different stories that Sib share. An easy read for kids, for elementary age kids.
Oh, and I just realized, Anne, I was supposed to share on what my son's opinion is. I feel like I blended it into what I already said. But besides him wanting to come here, that was the big thing, and attend a Sib Shop. He does have, like, now he actually has a friend that he attends Sib Shop with, when their schedules align and everything. And I think that just is like a true testament to him. It's, it is what it is. And that same friend, we invited him to come to actually the Valentine's dance that was held, and they got to be kids and have fun and do their thing while, his sister was there, or Camden's sister was there. So I think there's just different ways you can develop it and nurture those friendships too. But for him, that's his biggest thing. He actually wants a mentor also, somebody to navigate it through and at each stage, because he's already having those questions like you talk about the future. you know what'll happen when this, what'll happen when that, well, how come we can't do this, how come she can't do this, and we're navigating it and we're taking it baby steps.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Oh, I love it. He's so outgoing and like ask for what he needs, Mary, really seems like really empowered that in him.
Yes, he is. I will say that is one thing for both of them. I will say that I didn't realize what I was doing at a young age, but for both of them, it was the advocacy piece. And that's like, they actually just both went to Autism Day on the Hill this past year, or this past February. And he's asked to go every day. And he wears his shirt, advocacy or autism advocate, proudly at school. And people are like, where'd you get that? Because, it's just something that if you don't experience it, you don't know. So there's different ways that they can kind of, lead the path and the charge and help navigate this world too, I think, and have educate others.
So, yeah.
And one question is, are SIP shops offered online for those that live around the state, or will they be in the near future?
That's a great question. Right now, we do at Shelter, we do not offer them telehealth wise, but we definitely have had interest in that. And so I think that is definitely an area we want to explore. Right now, we just offer them on site every 3 months, once every 3 months. But thank you for bringing that up. I think the more people that we hear that from, the more we're needing to do that.
Are they also offered in Hiawatha at the child serve there?
Not yet.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they wanted to do? You can unmute or start your video. Put it in the chat room. No. If not, I want to thank our presenters. If you think of a question afterwards that you have for them, please just email me and I can get it to them and get you connected as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to Anne and
Thank you so
Mary.
much.
Thank you.